Hi everyone, today we're going to learn about web tests, and these are the topics that we're going to cover. Now let's take a look at the Endtest platform. You can sign up for a free trial whenever you want. And today we're going to focus on this web tests section. So what is a web test? It's a test for anything that runs in a browser. It can be a test for a web application, for a website, even for a Chrome extension or a PDF file or an email. And in this section here, you can see we have this folder. This is a test suite. And inside the test suite, we have test cases. And inside each test case, we have the steps. So each step is defined by an action, such as go to URL or adding an assertion or clicking on an element and so on. Okay, now let's see how we can record a test. For example, we have this website here and we want to create a new test for it. We have two ways to do that. We can either record the test with the Endtest Chrome extension, or we can just create the test step by step in the user interface. So we're going to use the Endtest Chrome extension that has a bunch of settings that you can configure. And what we need to do is we need to get the URL of this website and we need to put it here and click on the Start Recording button. It will take us to that website and now we can interact with the page like a regular user would. So I'm just going to type in inputs and click on buttons and whatever a regular user might do on this page. And now if you look at the Endtest Chrome extension, you can see that it recorded the steps that I performed. And you can see that each step has a human readable description and the action and the locator. So for example, the extension will do its best to use the most reliable locator. So if your element has an ID which is unique on the page, it will most likely use that ID. If not, it will look for a name or it will generate an XPath. Let's add an assertion for this element here, for this image. And I know that the image does not have any ID name or any text, so you can see it generated a CSS selector based on an attribute. So the locators that get generated do not rely on parents of the element or unstable attributes or anything that might not make them reliable as locators. Now I'm going to stop the recording and I can save the test in my account. I can save it in an existing test suite or in a new one. I'll create a new test suite. Let's give the test case a name. Let's call it sign up. And let's give the test suite a name. So SWIT, like the name of that website. Click on save. And now you can see the test suite. It's stored in my Endtest account. It's in the cloud. That means that I can access it from wherever I want. So we have the test suite. Inside we have the test case. And here we have the steps. So you can see the same human readable step name. Click on first name, write text in first name. And this is just a description. So you can write anything you want here. It doesn't get compiled. What matters is the action. The purpose of the step name is just to help you and your colleagues understand what that step is doing. Okay, let's look at the next topic. So modifying a test. It's actually really easy to modify a test. So for example, I can delete a step, I can change the action, but let's make a change that is actually useful. So I signed up with this email address, right? And it's a sign up test. That means that I can't really use the same email again unless I have access to the database and I can clean it somehow. So that means that when you're doing a sign up test, you need a new email address for each test execution, right? So here's what I can do. I can add a new step, and let's give it a description, generate a random email. And I want to create a new variable, so I will use the set variable action. I need to give the variable a name. I can call it whatever I want, but a good name would be email. And I can choose this variable type called random email. So what happens when the test will reach this step, it will generate a random email address and store it in this variable. And you don't want your email address to be completely random, so you can provide a domain like example.com or any domain that you want. Doesn't really matter. You don't have to own it, it doesn't have to exist, it's just a domain. But if you use this domain, endtestmail.io, this domain works like a disposable email service. That means that whatever emails get sent to an address from this domain, you'll be able to access them with the Endtest mailbox. And let me show you real quick how easy that is. So copy the email and paste it here in the link. And you can see the email here. You can interact with the elements and so on. Okay, let's get back to our test. Now, in step number 5, I'm simply creating a variable. So I need to use that variable. So in step number 6, instead of using that hard-coded email address, I'll just use the variable. So again, just to repeat, in step number 5, we're creating the variable. In step number 6, we're using it. So with just one small change, I made my test reusable. And that's how easy it is to modify a test. Let's look at the next topic, running the test. This is maybe the most fun part. So the tests are in the cloud. That means that you can easily execute them on our cross-browser cloud. So Endtest provides an extensive cross-browser cloud, and you have Windows machines with all of the major browsers like Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Edge. You've got macOS machines with Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, and you also have Android and iOS devices. And all of these are in the cloud, so it doesn't matter if you're on a Windows machine or a Linux machine. These tests get executed remotely, not on your local machine. You can also pick the screen resolution, and you can pick the geolocation. We even provide a real IP geolocation, so you can see what your website would look like and how it would work if it's accessed from an IP address in Germany, for example. Okay, let's run the test and see what happens. So now the test connected to a Windows machine from the Endtest cloud, where it started a real Chrome browser, and it's executing the instructions. Okay, we can see the test execution finished. So you have here the summary, where you have the number of cases, the number of steps, how many failed assertions, passed assertions, and errors. You have the detail logs, where you can see what happened in each step. You have an automatic screenshot for each step and an output. and it's actually really easy to debug a test. So you're seeing this output and you're wondering, okay, where am I doing this? You just click on the pencil icon and it takes you to that exact step. So it's very easy to debug. It's really easy to connect the logs with the steps. This is the random email that we generated, and we can see the test execution finished. You have all the screenshots here as well. You have the video recording as well. You can watch and see exactly how things unfolded. And you have the detailed browser logs as well, in case you need them. Okay, next topic. How to create a test without the Endtest Chrome extension. So this is actually very interesting because using the Endtest Chrome extension is optional. You can create a test just by using the website. So let's create a new test case in this suite. I want to create a test case that will access the email and it will extract this code, this activation code. So new test case, let's call it check email. So when creating a new test, you have to think of the steps that a real user would perform. So first they would go to the email, right? So in our case we need to go to the Endtest mailbox. And what is the Endtest mailbox? It's a website, right? So we need to get the URL, copy, and say here go to Endtest mailbox. And we'll use the go to URL action and we'll paste the URL here. But notice that the old hard-coded email address is here, but I don't want to use this one. I want to use that email from the email variable, right? So if you go to our documentation and you look at variables, using variables, you'll see that in order to join a variable with a string, you have to put the variable between double curly brackets like this, right? So let's do that. So instead of having just email here, we'll have double curly braces and email. Okay. Next thing I want to do when I get here. So I want to click on this element, right, on this email subject. So let's add a step here and call it click on email subject. And obviously you want to do a click, so we'll use the click action. And it's asking us to locate the element. We have to tell the test how to locate the element. So we can use one of these locators and let's see what we have. Let's inspect this element, and you can see here in the Chrome developer tools that it doesn't have an ID or a name, but we have a class name. Now that might not be the best option, but it's good enough for this scenario. So let's copy the class name and let's go here and say locate element by class name, paste it here. And next thing that I want to do, I want to extract this code, right? That's what I want to do. So extract code. And I want to put it in a variable because I imagine later in my test I might need to enter that code in some input on that website. So I'm going to create a variable by using the set variable action. Let's give it a name, code. And I want to extract the text from an element. So I'll use this method, extract value from element. And of course, it's asking us how to locate that element. So let's see what options we have. So let's inspect the element. It doesn't have an ID, a name, or anything like that. So let's just get the XPath. I could, of course, write a custom XPath that is more stable than what Chrome is offering me. We even have a chapter for that where we show you how to write a custom XPath or CSS selector based on attributes and other things. So you should check this out as well. Okay, now here's the thing. I don't know how fast that email will be delivered. When you sign up on a website, you might get email in 2 seconds, you might get it in 30 seconds. And Endtest has automatic waits that can be configured for each test. But I don't want to change the settings of the entire test just for one email. So here's what I can do. I can add a custom wait step. What do I want? I want to wait until this element here is present, because if this element is present, it means the email arrived. So let's add a new step here called wait for email. And in the miscellaneous action, you have a method called wait until, where you can define a custom wait condition. So I want to wait for that element to be present. How do I locate that element? If you remember from a few minutes ago, this element has a certain class name, email subject. So let's copy it. Let's put it here, class name, paste. And how long do I want to wait? Because maybe that email will never be delivered. I don't want my test to wait 5 hours. So let's say maximum 50 seconds. And I can also refresh the page while waiting. For example, the Endtest mailbox, it does not auto-refresh, so you need to have this option. Okay, so with just 4 steps, we have created a test case that will open the email and extract the code. Let's save it. And now you can see we have 2 test cases. So let's run them both. And while this is running, let's move on to the next topic. So the Endtest API. Notice that until now, I executed the tests by clicking on the run button, right? But you don't want to do that every day. You don't want to go to the Endtest platform, click on a button, run the test, look at it, and so on, because you want to save time and you want your test to be integrated with your continuous integration toolkit. So that's why we have the Endtest API. For example, to get an API request to start the test execution, you just have to click the button and get the request. Of course, there's a chapter for the Endtest API in the documentation where you can see what you can do with it. So you can start the test execution, you can fetch results, you can stop a test execution, and so on. That means that by using the Endtest API, you can integrate with pretty much any continuous integration solution from Jenkins, GitHub, GitLab, Bitrise, and so on. So the way it works is, when I send this API request, it will reply with a unique hash that is specific for that test execution that just got triggered. So you can even see that unique hash in the results page. And in my, let's say, continuous integration script, wherever that is in Jenkins or GitHub, I will take that unique hash and then I will send the other Endtest API request, the one for fetching the results. And by doing that, I will fetch the results and I will know, okay, did the test finish? How many passed? How many failed? How many errors? And based on those values, I know if the build will be passed or failed. And by the way, let's look at that test execution where we're signing up again with a different email, and then we're going to the Endtest mailbox. You can see the email did not arrive yet at that moment, and then the test waited 21 seconds, and the email was there, and it opened the email. You can see the code here, right? And then you can see the code extracted in this code variable. So very easy to do that. Okay. Next topic, the scheduler. So this is very useful. Let's say that I want to run this test every 1 hour because I just want to know that the sign up works all the time, that it's not broken. But I don't want to go through the trouble of putting it in Jenkins or GitHub and so on. I just want the test to run every 1 hour and that's it. So that's when you can use the scheduler. So select some configuration, for example, macOS, Firefox, and even some geolocation maybe, and click on the Add to Scheduler button. It will take you to the scheduler where you can give this entity a name, let's say smoke test. And here you have the configuration that we selected, and you have the days of the week when the test will run. So maybe I don't want to run it in the weekend for some reason. And you can choose a certain time, like each day at 11, or an interval, like every 1 hour. So this test will run every 1 hour on this configuration in the cloud. And for example, it will run every 1 hour, but I don't want to go to the results page, look at the results and check from time to time, okay, is everything okay? Is everything still working? So for example, I can choose to get email notifications. And for example, add here, get an email notification only when something runs, something fails. So imagine this. Your test will run every 1 hour in the cloud. You won't care what happens, but as soon as something goes wrong, a failed assertion or an error, you will get an email or a Slack notification or any type of notification that you choose. So that is a good example where automation actually helps you save time. Okay, the next topic, let's look at the settings for each test suite. Notice that each test suite has a settings section. The first tab refers to collaborators. In most scenarios, you will have to work with your colleagues. You will have to collaborate with them on the same tests. So in order to grant access to a colleague, you just click on the Add Collaborator button and you'll get a drop down with the users from your team, and you can choose a role like owner, editor, or viewer. And you can see in the collaborators chapter here, you can see what each role can do, the permissions for each role. So for example, we can see that the viewer, they can only run a test and see the results. They cannot modify or delete a test. So I'll add this user as a viewer. Now, if you have a lot of users in your team, you can keep them in groups and grant access to an entire group, like the group of developers, add them as editors. So everyone in the group of developers will have access as an editor. And since I'm the owner of the test in this case, I can also modify the permissions for each user or group. Okay. The notifications. For each test executions, you can get email notifications, Slack notifications, PagerDuty notifications. You can also get Microsoft Teams notifications. These are part of the webhook notifications. All of these are covered in the integrations chapter. So you have a chapter for Slack, you have a chapter for Microsoft Teams, and so on. The next section is automatic backups. This is really useful, and Endtest provides unlimited storage, so you should enable this for all your tests. What this does, it creates a backup automatically from your test each day and stores it for as long as you need. So if you granted access to a colleague and they accidentally delete something, you can just go to a previous backup and restore it. You can add labels, so these labels are defined on the team level. You create what labels you want with any color that you want, and you will see all the labels here, and you can, select what labels you want to assign to your test, like I did just now. And the advanced sections where you can configure pretty much anything. So element load timeout, for example. This means how long should the test wait for an element to appear before giving up. And you can read details about that. There is a chapter, what was it called? Something about waits here. So you can see how the smart waits work on Endtest for pages, for elements, and how you can add a wait until step like we did earlier for that email, and how you can even add a hard-coded pause step. Okay, so you can also, if you don't want automatic screenshots, you can disable those, only get a screenshot when an error happens. You can have automatic timestamps. You can disable the video recording, or enable live video, and so on. You can even choose the geolocation type that will be used for your test, like HTML5 or LIP geolocation. Okay, the final topic is about actions. So in a test case, you notice that each step is defined by an action. And let's see what actions we have. We have all the typical actions that a user might perform in a browser. So actions such as click, where you just click on an element, or go to URL, where you go to a website. Adding assertions, where you can check pretty much anything. An assertion is what gives you a pass or failed outcome in the results, and you can have as many assertions as you want in a test case, or you can have 0 assertions. You can check if an element is present, for example. You can check if an element matches a certain value. You can check pretty much anything. You can even add assertions for variables, or for the page title, the URL, the page source, the cookies, visual assertions, where you get the differences highlighted with a red color. You can upload files, you can take screenshots of the entire viewport of a certain element, or you can even take a screenshot of the entire page, top to bottom, with this special method. As we've seen earlier, you can create variables, like all sorts of variables, hard-coded values, passwords, random numbers, random strings, extracting values from elements, from databases, from JavaScript, and so on. Speaking of JavaScript, you can also add custom JavaScript steps, where, let's say, maybe you want to remove an element from your page right at a certain moment. So you would maybe write some custom JavaScript like this, and you can write any JavaScript you want. It will basically get executed in the browser console. So it's just like pasting some JavaScript here. All sorts of miscellaneous methods, like hovering, right-clicking, double-clicking, going back, forward. You can also interact with iframes, with multiple browser tabs. So Endtest doesn't have any limitations like that. It can interact with as many iframe levels and as many browser tabs as you want. You can even interact with elements from the shadow DOM, delete cookies. This Endtest utilities is interesting because you have methods like extracting a text from a pattern, or extracting a value from a JSON or from an array. Of course, you can use variables here and any other input. You can even store items in the Endtest vault, which is like a permanent storage. So one test can store an item, and then another test can fetch that item and use it. You can even do math calculations if you don't want to do them with JavaScript. So I don't know, you can check if the VAT is correct on a certain product in your e-commerce website. you can send API requests. So the typical request types, you can add params where you can have variables as well, of course. The authorization type, the headers, the body, and you can store the response in a variable and then use it further down in your test. Just like in programming, you can reuse components. You know that in programming you have this best practice that you never have to write the same thing twice. The same thing is available in Endtest. So if you have like a lot of tests and you need to log in all of them, you won't write the login steps 50 times. You'll just write them somewhere in some test case and then, import that test case. So importing a test case is just like calling a function. It executes the latest version of that test case. You can do that in a loop. You can add if statements. So let's say we go to this website and sometimes we have a pop-up, sometimes we don't, right? So what you would do, you would start an if statement to check if that pop-up is present. And if it's present, maybe you would write something in the pop-up, maybe you would click on a button, and then you would end the if statement. So notice that the steps between the start if statement and the end if statement, these two steps get highlighted with a color here, and they will only be executed if the if statement is true. And of course, you can have nested if statements and else statements and so on. And you can also connect to databases if you want and execute SQL queries. So maybe you want to clean the data from your user table after the test is finished, or maybe, I don't know, you want to insert some data, right, or update some data. You can do that as well. So notice you have all of the components of a scripting language. You have variables, you have reusable components, if statements, else statements, loops, connections to external services, and so on. So all of the actions allow you to create an automated test for pretty much any scenarios. So there shouldn't be any scenario that you can't automate with Endtest. And this completes all of our topics. So thank you for watching this tutorial. And if you ever have any questions for us, you can always send us a message by using this chat widget. Bye bye.